Anybody not ready? All right, good evening. I'm Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, and with me is St. Petersburg Police Chief Anthony Holloway. And the information I'm going to give you is, we always qualify it, and I'll stress it again here, is preliminary, based upon what we know at this stage of an ongoing investigation involving a St. Petersburg officer and an officer-involved shooting. Everything is subject to change as the investigation unfolds, as we learn more and know more, but I'm going to give you everything that I can tell you right now as we know it. At about this afternoon, at about 3:30 p.m., St. Petersburg Police Department received a call to the Wildwood Park at 1028th Street South. There was a male and a female involved in an argument in the park. It was a domestic type argument. The caller reported, who was not involved in it, reported that the male had a gun, and he could see that the male had a gun, and that he was actively involved in an argument with the female, and that he was attempting to take the female's phone. As the officers arrived on the scene, they conducted interviews of the female and of the witness, and they established probable cause to arrest the male subject on a domestic battery charge. That male subject then fled from the park, which is here to the west, came down 13th Avenue South, which we're on now, and as he was coming eastbound, running down 13th Avenue South, a St. Petersburg canine officer, Leighton Williams, was coming eastbound, and he saw the subject. The information had been put out over the police radio that the subject had a gun and that they had probable cause for his arrest. Officer Williams continued eastbound, and just behind me at the intersection, you'll see that tan house right over my left shoulder here is the subject, and I'm not releasing his name right now because we're in the process of notifying his next of kin. As soon as we're able to notify his next of kin, then we'll release his name. He's a 17-year-old black male. The subject was concealing himself along the northeast corner of that tan house behind me, and he was crouched down behind a fence area. As Officer Williams got out of his cruiser and got his canine out, the subject then moved further to the east and ran south between that yellow house, and you'll see that blue house right behind the yellow house to the east. It's kind of a, I'll call it an alleyway, if you will. The subject ran down to the south, took up a position around a corner by the garage. As Officer Williams went down that alleyway and rounded the corner, the subject was standing there, and Officer Williams could see that he had a gun in his waistband. As Officer Williams challenged him and told him to something to the effect of, and again, this is still ongoing, this is the best information I have, but he did challenge him. The exact words right now I'm not sure of, but something to the effect of drop the gun. The subject reached for the gun and pulled the gun out and was in the process of pointing it toward Officer Williams. Officer Williams fired one time. The subject was struck in the midsection in the abdomen area. He is now at Bayfront Hospital in surgery. The best information we have on his condition is it's 50-50 as to whether he's going to live. So we'll update that information as we find out more. As to this person, the subject here, the 17-year-old, he is also a suspect, and there's probable cause to charge him with an armed robbery that happened this past Sunday involving a firearm. He was at a location here in St. Petersburg and committed a robbery of a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old. And St. Petersburg Police, again, have probable cause to arrest him on that armed robbery charge. So that's what we know at this point. Happy to answer any questions that you have, and we will. Here's the gun itself that's there. We'll release a picture of the gun to you, and we'll get it out. But that's the gun that's on the ground back there right now, and I best estimate it's either a 45 caliber semi-automatic handgun or a 40 caliber. It kind of looks like a 45 to me, but forensics hasn't processed the scene yet, so I've seen it and don't want to get too close to it because we're processing the scene. But we'll have PIO send out to you a picture of the firearm. And I think we're probably pretty close to being able to release the identity of the suspect. Again, as soon as his family's notified, and detectives are in the process of doing that right now.
So, Sheriff, this was clearly a situation where the officer was in fear for his own safety.
No, no doubt. When talked to the officer, and he showed us exactly what happened there. And as soon as he rounded the corner and he challenged him, the guy reached for the gun and was coming out with the gun toward the officer. And at that point, the officer fired one round. Frankly, he showed a lot of restraint and only firing one round when somebody has a semi-automatic handgun and they're pointed at you, coming up at you. And so he fired once and did his job.
Sheriff, what number officer involved shooting is this in St. Pete?
I don't know. I don't count them.
And the officer is on routine administrative leave pending the outcome?
Yeah, that's something that Chief Holloway can speak to. Our role in this with the Pinellas County Deadly Force Task Force is to conduct the investigation, to conduct the criminal investigation, and to gather all that. That's what we're doing. As far as any administrative action, as far as how it will be handled administratively and anything to do with policy, that's a question for Chief Holloway. But the ordinary course is they put on some sort of leave, but I can let him answer that question if you want.
So there's nothing on the surface that would indicate that this officer acted inappropriately?
Everything on the surface indicates this officer acted absolutely appropriately, consistent with the law, consistent with training, consistent with best practices, and did everything he had to do to save his own life. And that's what all the information points to at this time. And from everything we've seen, from the physical evidence, from the statements, from everything we know. There is body camera video of the situation, so we'll be, of course, reviewing that. There were some other officers here in the area that were at the middle of the intersection that heard the shot, but they weren't present when the shot went off, when the shooting happened. So no, Chip, absolutely everything here indicates it is a very terrible situation, and that this guy decided that he was going to take his gun out, point it at a cop, and try and shoot the cop. And thankfully, the good guy acted first, and the cop was able to defend himself.
And I know the answer to this question, but body cam video, will that be available at any time?
At some point. Question is when. And we need to take a look at it, view it. We'll make a decision on that. We'll absolutely get you out the photograph of the gun that's there, and then we'll make a decision on the body cam video. I can't, until I see it myself and evaluate it, then we'll make a decision about when we release it. At some point it will be, but we'll make a decision about that.
Sheriff, do you know how far, the distance between the house here and where that initial fight happened?
So the address there is 1028th Street South, and the address here where the shooting happened is 2488 13th Avenue South. So it's a couple blocks away.
Okay. Thank you.
Sheriff, what are your thoughts on situations like these when officers feel that they need to protect themselves?
I'm not sure I understand your question. What do you mean? What's my feeling on it? It's sad that an officer has to be in that situation where somebody's trying to kill the officer. These situations don't have to happen. There's an easy solution to the problem. Don't try and shoot a cop. And don't carry a gun as a 17-year-old and running from the police. Don't do robberies on Sunday, get in a fight with a gun at a park on a Wednesday afternoon, and then when you see a cop get out, is you run, and then when the cop approaches you, you reach for the gun in your waistband. That's where the problem is. It's with him. Easy solution to that problem. Don't do it.
Sheriff, if he's arrested and charged in this armed robbery, because that's separate from sort of what happened here today, do you know which agency?
St. Petersburg Police Department is conducting that investigation. As I said, they have probable cause to arrest him on the armed robbery charge. So assuming if he survives, he'll be charged with the armed robbery, plus a variety of offenses resulting from what happened here today.
Chief, can you talk a little bit about the robbery that happened on Sunday?
Sure, I can tell you very briefly. The detectives were actually working this case prior to this. They didn't know anything about this. So this past Sunday, the suspect robbed a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old at gunpoint. The detectives built probable cause today to take them into custody. They did say at the scene, with the gun that the sheriff showed you, there was a gun like that was used in the robbery.
10-year-old?
10-year-old and a 15-year-old.
What did he rob them of?
I don't want to get into that right now, but
that was clearly dangerous in the community.
Well, if you think about here, like the sheriff said, a 17-year-old is out there robbing a 10 and a 15-year-old. What like you said, what are you going to rob a 10-year-old of?
Chief, did that just happen on the street, or did it happen in a store?
And like I said, I don't have all the information, but we can get that to you. But the detectives were looking into that case, so there were two kids that were robbed by another kid.
Chief, what are your thoughts on something like this happening when, you know, we consistently are having these conversations of younger people that are in possession of these weapons here in St. Pete?
It's the same thing we're saying. We've got to start talking to these kids, whether the parents, whoever, and tell these kids they need to put these guns down, because it's getting to the point where not just this shooting, just think about Sunday. Let's just go back to Sunday. You want to talk about that? A 10 and a 15-year-old robbed by another kid at a gun. The gun's the problem. The guns are the problem. And that's what we need to do. We need to take these guns off the street, because people are getting killed and people are getting hurt out here.
Chief Holloway, how do you suggest that these guns get off the street, and how are we going to keep them out of these kids' hands? Where are they getting them from?
Well, and I can tell you right now, we talk about it all the time. You and I cover it. If people were to take their guns out of their cars, I mean, last month we just looked at it again, where people are leaving their cars unlocked with their guns in their cars, and these kids are going by, checking the car to see if the gun. I'm not saying anything about Second Amendment. You have a right to carry a gun. Let me say, but why don't you take the gun and put it someplace safe and not leave it in your car? Because look what happened to that today. And the sheriff could probably tell you more than in the county. That's what we see. Unlocked cars with guns in them.
Yeah, and I'll remind you all two things. One, about 80% of all car break-ins, there's no forced entry. 80% of all car break-ins, there's no forced entry. That means people are leaving their cars unlocked, and we see this all the time. Remember, and we're getting close to the anniversary, December 2014, Tarpon Springs police officer Charlie Condick shot and killed in the city of Tarpon Springs by a thug with a gun. And that guy got that gun from an unlocked car burglary. So this happens. Look at the media reports that are coming out of South Florida from the Hollywood officer that was killed a couple days ago. Car burglaries. That's what the guy was doing. That gun was taken from a car burglary. So this is a problem, and the cause of it are these people that are breaking into the cars and taking the guns and doing bad things with the guns. They're the cause of it. They're the ones that are at fault. But the public at large has a responsibility to secure their firearms. Not saying that they're at fault. The bad guy's the one that caused this. The bad guy's the one that's at fault. They need to be responsible for their actions. But people need to not leave their guns in their cars, need to lock their car doors. And it's really that simple. When you think about 80% of all the car break-ins involve no forced entry, we could all collectively contribute to, if not solving it, seriously mitigating that. And that's really what people need to do. We make great efforts. And whether it's public service announcements on TV, whether it's billboards, whether it's signs in neighborhoods, we do everything we can to remind people. But you know what? For some reason, they just don't do it. And you know, it is a problem. But you know, and the gun issue with these young people is serious. There's no question. Why is a 17-year-old running around? And you know, we'll find out. I don't know. But he's 17. Is this a stolen gun? Is this what we call a street crime gun? Probably, but I can't tell you because we haven't been able to touch it to run the serial number, but we'll let you know. But if history holds true, that's most likely the case, is that he got it from somebody on the street and it's stolen out of a car, and it gets passed around until something like this happens. Yeah. All right, thanks everybody.